Okay, we are in October, which is probably explains the skeleton next to you there, Laura.
Yeah.
At the end of the third quarter for 2023. I feel like we have a lot to cover here, but first, quick introduction. So I'm Kyle Klein, one of the co-leaders here with Gabrielle Vigil. And then, of course, we have David Barker, owner and qualifying broker and professor of real estate. And we have Laura Lichtenstein, our qualifying broker as well. So first question, actually, is how are you liking your new role?
The title of professor of real estate, I'm rather enjoying. I like to do business development, work with the brokers, help on transactions. It's the kind of thing I've been doing for a long time, so I've got experience at it. I enjoy it.
Good.
I love turning over the day-to-day things to the two of you and getting terrific support from Laura and a lot of QB issues. Would be?
Yeah, it's been kind of a wild market this year, and so having that extra support is really helpful for I think a lot of people.
There's a lot of change afoot out there, not only in our market locally, but nationally with what's going on. We need our brain power to really be up there to be watching after things and advise our clients and our brokers.
Yeah. So before we dive into some of the numbers here, just quick housekeeping. So we are doing a food drive and clothing and bedding and sort of house necessities for Bienvenidos, a local nonprofit here. And so that's running through the end of this month. So please come down to our office and drop off those things. We've had some great donations so far. So we're happy to help them. They help our local unsheltered and families in need. And so it's one of those great organizations that we want to support. So please come by our office and donate.
Awesome.
Also, there's a number of kind of other things that are happening in the real estate world outside of, again, just the market conditions. We are having a very lively debate here in Santa Fe regarding this proposed tax on million-plus homes.
That mansion tax, they call it.
The mansion tax is what's been nicknamed, yep. So I was curious what everyone's thoughts are on that. Seems like a contentious one.
It's very interesting. I have to say personally that I am not in alignment with the city proposal, but nor am I in alignment with not doing anything because we need affordable housing. My concern is they're putting a tax only on residential sales. I mean, if we want to try to bring some fairness to this, why not put a tax on the commercial shopping centers that sell out on Sirius Road,
right?
Where perhaps there are 350 local employees working there who are equally challenged at buying an affordable house. So I feel like it would be more appropriate to spread that out evenly across all real estate transactions, and that would bring the percentage down. 3% is a tidy sum of money.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Laura, I'm curious from your perspective.
I am in alignment with David for the most part. I think that the city should maybe think about getting its house in order and figuring out how to manage the funds that it has and has collected.
Mm-hmm.
And
you're talking about that audit issue that comes up year after year after year.
That one, yes. So that's what Broker Bob here has been focused on. You can see what it's done to him.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done before the city should think about taxing real estate transactions.
What do you think, Kyle?
Boy, I mean, I don't want to dive into it too deep because it opens up a whole can of worms politically. But I think the city has since we have the attention of the community, I feel like there's an opportunity to make a lot of necessary changes to how we permit things, our zoning restrictions. I mean, there's a lot. It's like I feel like adding funds to it is one component of maybe 20 that need to happen, right? And so there's a lot of opportunity to improve the housing situation here, but it's not just going to be one measure. It's just not.
Yep. And
so I would like to see a more cohesive strategy and not just, hey, we're slapping this on and it's going to do something. An example is I know that we started collecting on the short-term rentals, right? The taxes there, lodgers tax similar to our hotels. I'm sure that drew up plenty of money in the last couple of years. I'm not sure where that's going. So I'd love to know where the bigger picture is on this before enacting that. So it feels like the heart's in the right place. I'm just not sure if the mechanics are there yet.
I like that comment because my biggest concern is I have seen no specific proposals about what this is really going to do to bring more affordable housing to Santa Fe.
Right.
I mean, bottom line, the city funds affordable housing out of its general fund today.
Yep.
And they're going to be saving that money to spend on other things, and they're just transferring the tax from their general fund to specific sellers of real estate. And I don't see any real tangible, specific changes that they're going to do to build more apartments and houses.
Yeah, and I think it is telling that HomeWise and some of those builders have been the heavy lobbies on this, to help get them more funding, right? Which is good in some ways, right? But also I think we can't have it all in the same bucket either, right?
Right.
It needs to be a very broad sort of thinking on how to solve this issue. And I just want to also point out that it's not just unique to Santa Fe, unfortunately, right? This is sort of a nationwide.
Oh, yes.
This is a nationwide issue, and especially here in the Mountain West, where a lot of in-migration has occurred the last couple of years. This pressure is not going away anytime soon, unfortunately.
So what about the last quarter market sales and what's happening in real estate in Santa Fe?
Yeah, I want to actually go back to the beginning of the year. So what were the predictions? What did we say? Right?
Interesting.
Some of the, I think we all agreed that we felt that the demand was still on Santa Fe.
Yes.
And that while the pressure seems to have come off a little bit, that we weren't going to see substantial price reductions, right? That there was just too much demand and too little inventory. So where are we at? Is that true?
I think that the demand and inventory have gotten a little bit closer together.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we've talked about how the market is kind of looking like a sine wave right now.
Yeah.
It's and if it's anyone's guess. I think that some of us were thinking that interest rates might start to come down towards the end of this year, and that has not happened. No, we had a very good jobs report.
Yep.
For the third quarter. And so interest rates are staying up there, and they're up at about 8% right now. So we were wrong.
Yep.
But I think that we were also thinking that buyers are going to start to get used to that. And we're seeing that. It's still a strong market.
The market is very active. When you look at sales compared to this time last year, we're actually down 14%. And the inventory level is almost identical to where it was last year. So what I see is that there's more balance in the market now. Buyers are getting a chance at the negotiating table. It's not all just in favor of the sellers. So I'm glad to see more of a balanced market. We needed that. We don't want to get back to the craziness that we had in 2021.
No, and we've seen actually a decrease in terminations. Last month there was maybe a handful of terminations in the office, which tells me that buyers and sellers are on even playing ground, and they're working well together again. It's not so much of a contentious market like it was before during the pandemic. We're getting buyers in the houses, they're working with the sellers, and they're closing the deals.
There's concessions being made.
Yeah, there are. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. We're seeing fewer houses selling at or above the list price.
Yeah.
I think concessions are happening in the initial negotiation period, as well as after inspections. I think sellers are realizing that they do need to take buyers seriously.
Mm-hmm. How about multiple offers? Are you still seeing a preponderance of those?
Not as many. No, we're not seeing as many of those. And when we are seeing them, it's more like 2 or 3 or 4 offers as opposed to 24.
So what do you think are the most active parts of the market, Laura, in terms of price ranges?
That's an interesting question. I think we have seen a shift away from the very high end, but I'm starting to see more transactions coming on in that price range and more listings coming on above $1 million.
That's an interesting point. I made a comment earlier that the listing inventory is about the same this year compared to last year. But when you look at the over $1 million, the inventory in that market is substantially higher.
Yeah, it's almost doubled.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Looking at the market as a whole, like I like to look at big trends because sometimes just, week to week is just too narrow of a focus. If we look back 2 years, so we go back at the end of September of 2021 and compare that entire time period to now, we're actually down on sales nearly 35-40%. Now, that sounds like a big, scary number, but this is also the real estate peak of, maybe 100 years, right? So you are measuring the high point. In terms of inventory, we're up about 30%. So that gets back to your point about balance, right? And so I think now we're settling into, yes, there's more options on the table, which provide buyers a little bit of leverage in terms of getting concessions out of sellers. Their buying power has been diminished if they're taking out a loan, so there's some challenges there. But the flip side is this last quarter, so the number I read in the Wall Street Journal was 24% increase in loan originations this last quarter. So in the summer, everyone got nervous with the interest rate change, and as we were kind of talking about, they got used to it, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I think so. And I think we're still seeing a lot of first-time home buyers who are struggling with the interest rates.
Yeah.
But the activity below 400,000, if you list a home under 400,000, you're going to get instant activity, assuming it's a reasonable house.
Yeah.
Well, the affordable housing is so difficult right now. Our average sales price now is what, $880,000 in Santa Fe? I mean, imagine.
Yeah.
With the interest rates that we have at 7.5% today's market, wow, that's a challenge.
It's a big challenge for a lot of people. So speaking of which, let's talk about the other sort of market segment. So land sales, pretty steady, pretty flat, right?
Yes.
So we haven't seen any major changes there. And then
Although the days on market on land sales have substantially increased.
yes, yeah, which in some ways is seasonal too. It seems at the end of the year things kind of get fairly quiet on the land side, but overall, that market, we saw a good bump in the middle of the year where we're like, okay, like land is coming back stronger, and it's maintained that position, but hasn't really grown and hasn't really shrunk. So land is moving just a little slower. Looking at the luxury side of things, we had to bump that number up, right? We're talking like 1.5 million plus, 2 million plus, for that sort of range. Inventory's up. Sales are pretty steady as well, right? They haven't really gone up or down. They're just pretty steady. What does that tell us about confidence in the market right now?
I think it says there's lots of confidence in the Santa Fe market, and we still have a market that has tremendous draw and appeal to people in other parts of the country that are looking to relocate. So we see that daily. People wanting to explore Santa Fe, see what the community has to offer. For better or for worse, our prices are still fairly darn affordable compared to a lot of other communities across the United States.
Yeah, especially destination markets like our own.
Yes.
I was looking at some of the tourist numbers, and between our markets this summer, like Indian Market and so forth, and then the Balloon Fiesta, I mean, they're talking record attendance at these things. So I don't think we're going back to any sort of pre-pandemic levels anytime soon.
No.
No, I don't think so.
So what's the advice then? So let's pretend I'm a buyer. What sort of things should I be looking out for right now?
The good news is you have a lot more options out there. With the inventory up substantially, longer days on market, you have more time, I think, to make a decision. But I think it always comes down to making sure you really define what it is that you're looking for and be prepared to act. We still see in this market some properties that hit the market regardless of price range. If they are attractive, there's a lot of appeal for it. That property is going to sell in less than a week.
Yeah.
We still see that today, even if it's a $2 million property.
And I think buyers still need to be cautious. While it's important to act quickly, I think they still need to be cautious about overpaying.
Right.
Based on their budget, because that's what gets them a little worried later on and makes them look for excuses to terminate, and that just isn't working quite as well as it used to. Right.
I can't underscore the importance of thorough inspections. The problems that some people created for themselves by waiving inspections when we had a crazy market and buying properties with unknown conditions was really surprising and devastating in some circumstances.
Yeah. Are you seeing that in with our transaction coordinators that buyers are now having more opportunities, whether it's like roofs or plumbing or whatever, they're exercising that and getting better concessions out of sellers?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. excuse me, we're seeing negotiations on a lot of things now. The buyers are aware that they don't have as much buying power as they would have in the past. But the sellers are also now aware of that.
Yeah.
You know, before you had the sellers trying to get top dollar, those pandemic prices. And I think they're kind of wising up that they might have missed that boat and they need to give a little bit more. So what we're seeing is those properties that are like move-in ready, those are moving pretty quick.
Yes.
You know, buyers will come in, there's not a whole lot that needs to be done to the property and those close. The ones that need a little love, a little TLC, those ones are sitting a little bit longer because buyers just don't have the means to take care of those renovations right now.
Thanks.
So when it comes to, you know, getting a new roof or maybe a boiler replaced or something like that, sellers are starting to budge a little bit and give a little bit back to the buyer.
Speaking of the new roof, I don't think I've seen a bid for less than $30,000, and that's not on a big house.
Right.
My word, roofs are expensive.
Yep.
Yeah, and you know, with our flat roofs here, there's never any problem. So you know, that's
No, now they're required to slope a 1/4 inch per foot.
oh right, sorry, yeah.
Yes, required.
Your QE is showing.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I think we're also seeing sellers wising up to the changing market. You know, you had mentioned a statistic that sellers who price their homes correctly are getting 12% more than sellers who overprice them
Yep.
and then have to come down.
Yeah, so this last quarter, that number shrank a little bit, which is good. That, again, gets back to the point of balance. So that number's closer to 90%, right? So I do think people stop pushing that price point as much.
Yeah.
Despite us, I mean, still looking at the numbers, it's like, again, the feelings, the chatter out there is one thing, but looking at the numbers, it's still very strong. And
Yeah.
it's a very strong market. So if I'm a seller, right, shoes on the other foot,
Yep.
what should I expect?
If you're a seller, you want to make sure you price it correctly. You want to be looking at the comparable sales. You want to be looking at the time of year. You want to think about making your home as presentable as possible.
Yes.
Whether that's staging, moving out and just getting it completely cleaned up, making cosmetic repairs, and then think about things like, yeah, okay, it does make a difference if you've got a new roof or a new water heater, things like that. If you can show a buyer that, yes, you're taking care of the home and that you have consistently taken care of the home, it's going to present much better.
My advice for a seller is the best way to approach the market is to act as if you are a buyer and try to distance yourself from your personal investment in your property, which every seller has great pride in, and take a good logical look and think about your approach if you were the buyer of the property.
So Gabs, we've heard a lot of people make the comment over the years, like, I don't want to sell in the winter, right? Because, well, I mean, and there's some logistical things like holidays, right? You know, it's a tough time to move. But would you argue selling in winter is a bad idea?
Not at all. I mean, we've seen historically in our office a lot of activity in the winter. We see a lot of transactions October, November, even December. So I think in Santa Fe it's a great time to list your property. The demand is high here, and that's not going to change.
And there's less competition.
Yeah, right.
Right. I mean, I'm thinking about the inventory numbers. So like March is when things really kind of blow up inventory wise. So if you're listing your home in the winter, like in January, you might be only competing with maybe 10 homes that are comparable versus 100 come March and April. So I'm of the opinion it's like in winter is actually not a bad time because the people are motivated, right? You get a little less of the tire kickers out there, which we have plenty of in this town.
People still need to buy.
Yeah. That's it. Okay, so now we're heading into Q4, right?
Yes.
Historically, we slow down, as mentioned, things like holidays and whatnot. What are our thoughts going into this last quarter? What's going to happen out there?
I don't think we're going to see any significant changes over the short term. I think everybody's sort of holding out for interest rates to take a decline. And we're all hopeful that happens. I don't think that's going to happen for probably about a year. And one of the concerns I have is if interest rates drop down to 5% in that range, I think we're going to see a surge of activity.
Yeah.
What's going to happen with that? Does that mean that all of a sudden prices are going to escalate again? That concerns me.
It was pretty.
Yeah, I think the inflation trigger would be back, right? And that's the whole point of this, right?
Yes.
And so, yeah, we're in a very tenuous position in that regard of like how to balance between potentially putting us into a recession, right? And then the flip side of that is putting us back in an inflation sort of spiral.
Right.
I would guess the Fed's going to be careful about dropping interest rates.
Yeah.
I would think they would come down pretty slowly if they do, so that we don't have that kind of surge.
Yes.
So
I'm not counting on it in the near term. I really do think we're looking
No.
maybe Q4 next year.
Yes.
I think, yeah, as David said, I think it's probably at least a year before we see any significant change in interest rates.
Yeah. We're back to about, going back historically again. It's been about since 2000 since we were at this percentage rate, right? And so it's not like unheard of. It's actually more normal historically. It's challenged because the asset pricing is so high.
Yes.
And that's the issue, right? Okay. Well, it's been a kind of turbulent market in some ways, but at the same time, if you average it out, don't look at it week by week. I would say we're still looking at a fairly strong market, strong pricing. I would imagine we end this year, all things considered, the state of the world and what's going on locally and internationally, everything in between. Santa Fe continues to be a pretty strong place to continue to buy and sell real estate. Like it seems like we're in a little bit of a bubble. And so I guess we can take that with us.
And you're fortunate that it was essentially the pandemic that changed part of the demographic of the buyers coming to Santa Fe. With that, we all of a sudden had couples in their 30s and 40s moving to Santa Fe with children and having jobs. The jobs were mostly remote, but nonetheless, they came to Santa Fe. They love it. And it's nice to have that younger buying generation coming. That's going to continue.
Yeah, it's been nice to see some of our peers around town.
And it's nice to see the younger generation having, in spite of the interest rates, more buying power.
Yeah.
So you'll see that. Interesting. It'll be interesting to see what happens next year because it's an election year.
Right. And that does always play into it.
Always.
Yes.
Always.
Well, I'm going to close this out and just say thank you guys. And again, we're doing this drive right now, so hopefully people bring some stuff by the office, could continue to support our community. And we'll sit down at the end of the year and see how right or wrong we were.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And as I say, we would love to hear from any of you out there in the audience about comments you have on this or questions that you may have that we can address another time.
Yeah, drop them in the comments on this video, whether that's on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, or whatever. And if we have to do a follow-up and try to answer them our best, we will.
Perfect.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.